Hey, alright, today I'm going to show you how we can use a metric system in order to create a sailing boat. It's going to be very accurate and very good looking, as you can see here in this example. Alright, so this is a preset that we're going to create in a way that we can reuse it later on in our future works. Alright, so as you can see here, I'm going to use this Chaos Group dummy vessel, this warship. And I also have a box, as you can see here, 155 meters by 20 by 9 height. So I am in my unit setup using metric system, and 1 unit equals 1 meter, right? So that's going to be pretty accurate to what we need. I'm going to hide this box because this box just determines how big our waves needs to be, and I'm gonna hide it. All right, so here I've got my vessel. Let me do a quick test render. And as you can see here, I've got some sky as HDRI, and I've got my vessel ready to go. So now we can add some ocean and do some sailing waves. Okay, now let's go ahead and add some keyframes, because this is what we need in order to have a longer animation. So I'm gonna put 320, and in order to make it go a little faster, I'm gonna use 24 frames per second. That's a film. I'm gonna click OK. Now I'm gonna select this boat, and let's click Auto Key, create a key. That's the first key. And now let's go to 320 and move it somewhere here, about 40. And that's how our ship is going to go. But if we click play, we can see that it's kind of starting slow and then starts to accelerate. So we need to fix that. If we go to our splines here, we can find that this spline needs to be linear, and this one we are going to correct a little bit more. Something like this. So we're gonna have almost straight line, but with a little bit acceleration, a little bit slowed down. Okay, just a smidge. We're not really gonna notice that. Okay, so we're here. And now if we click play, you can see that our ship is sailing pretty much with the same tempo. All right, now let's go and create our water. So I'm gonna use Liquid Simulator. I'm gonna go on top view, and I'm gonna place it around my boat. Something like this. It's a little bit too big, so let's adjust the size here. I actually need to use smaller cell size. So those, as you can see here, those are separations. This is the cell size, so I'm gonna use something much smaller, 0.14, and much smaller here. All right, now this one can go slightly up somewhere here, so that's a perfect breaking point for the wave. Okay, now let's continue setting up our simulation here. In dynamic rollout, we're gonna do initial fill up of 25%, so that's a quarter somewhere here. That's a middle, so yeah, that's a quarter right on this line. And here let's add some foam. Click enable, create that preset for the foam, and let's adjust it. So foam amount going to be 0 because we're gonna generate foam from splashes. Now the size is going to be 0.05 meters. We want it to have really small and variation large 5. So we're gonna have small and big ones, and the distribution 300. Gonna have a little bit more of them as a default. Now bubble to bubble interaction, we don't need that, so I'm gonna put 0, and rising speed I'm gonna put half meter, and falling speed I'm gonna put 5 meters. So that's how much our rays is going to be and how deep they're gonna dive the bubbles. Okay, now sticky foam is 0, and a surface lock we're gonna leave as it is by default. Now with the patterns, we're gonna have one pattern with a 1.2 with a very small radius. All right, now splashes. I'm gonna move this one to the side. And now let's create splashes. And let's create that splash mist. Just make sure it's there. Right here, splash. And that's foam. All right, so let's go back to the simulation and go down to our splash. So splashes, we're gonna have more of them, bigger splashes with a threshold of 10. This is by default. And we're not gonna have any mist. It's just gonna kill our rendering time. And let's see foam amount on hit. Let's do 4, and depth 4. So 4 meters high, 4 meters low, and our foam on top is going to be 5 meters. Okay. Now that's a good amount. We're gonna have like 1 meter of just the foam if it needs to rise up. Now splash air drag, let's do here 5 meters. That's height of our waves. Mist is 1, and outside edge 4. So that's as long as they're gonna leave on this simulation. So initial multiplier here, initial round, those are gonna stay by default. And liquid like, I'm gonna have 1, and affect liquid also 1. All right, so let's go down to our output. Make sure you have the path where the scene saved, and you have enough space, obviously, because this thing is kind of space consuming. So we're gonna have here liquid and velocity ID, and an output we're gonna have liquid here. Okay, now on the input we're gonna have it linear mode, and everything here basically stays by default. All right, now in the preview I'm going to have all of those also by default, and just detail I'm gonna add a little bit more. Now regarding our simulation here, auto range, I'm gonna have speed, auto, so all of that stuff basically stays by default. Now in the rendering we need to use ocean mesh, and it says strongly recommended to use static default geometry rendering infinite ocean. Well, we're enabling basically to have this infinite ocean. And again, it's just giving us a message that it's going to be very consuming, very expensive to render, to simulate. All right, so ocean level also 25, because this is what we set it up there. Now all of this stuff stays by default. No need to change here anything. Multiplier 1. Now in the displacement, we need to add ocean texture. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna here select phonics ocean texture, and let's click OK. Now we can drag and drop this here and adjust it. So the height is going to be 5 meters, and we need sharpness. We don't need any coherence, and we don't need any wave crest. Now it's going to be linear, and actually I'm going to give it a little direction, so we will cut the waves as we approach them. Okay, now I'm going to select this liquid and actually give it a texture right now. So that's my water texture, full color, and depth 100 centimeters, so you can copy those in order to make your water. Now what we need to do here next is let's add a VRay plane, so we will not forget it. I'm gonna go and add VRay plane, and let's give it a little bit yellowish texture. Plane, and this is going to be VRay material with a slightly yellowish color. And this guy, we actually need to put it much lower below the ocean, like minus 50, 150. Okay. All right, now what we need to do here is, as you can see here, the boat sails, the water moves, the ocean moves, but we don't have the follow-up of our box. So in this box we need to attach it to our vessel like that, and now this box travels with the vessel. Okay, now let's do some adjustments to our foam and our splashes. So let's start from foam. We're gonna use points and slightly brownish color, because if it's white it's really gonna burn with the sun. It's gonna get really white and we're gonna get a lot of overexposure, so we might not see much of our foam. Okay, now size multiplier, I'm gonna put 4, and the rest is by default. We're using the phonics liquid here, it's connected. So we need to force off in the motion blur. It's also taking a lot of time to calculate, and we're gonna put slightly smaller motion blur multiplier. In the scattering, we need to use approximate, and with the points here, let's put this to much smaller alpha size, and way smaller point radius, motion blur, smaller steps. Okay, I think this is ready to go. Actually, motion blur amount, let's leave it at 1, and light cache speed up at 0.9. So that's how we're gonna use it. Now disable liquid shadows. This is also going to speed up the render here, the creation of our splashes, and also we don't need them in the render, just takes time. Okay, now let's do the splashes here. Same thing, we're gonna put it on point, and let's reduce the color to 205. Now with the map, let's do the size 4, the same one as we did before. And here those guys, they're gonna stay by default. Make sure also to disable liquid shadows. And here we're gonna do the force on with those splashes. Okay, now same here, approximate, and let's leave this by default, light cache 0.9, speed up. Okay, now the size here as well is going to be 0.02. Remember, point radius same as foam, 0.7, and the rest can stay as it is. We're gonna have some more blur on those splashes. All right, now I think we can add here something for the motor, some water exit. It's not necessary, you don't have to have it, but let's add it just in case, because some boats have motors. And let's do this, just position this more in the center, and I'm gonna go into my standard primitives. I'm gonna take box, F3, and I'm gonna put a box here. Click Z to zoom in, and let's do something like this. All right, so this box is going to be our liquid right here. Let's add, by selecting this, we can click add and select our box. Let's do much smaller velocity, 14. And here we don't need any noise. Everything here stays by default. Motion velocity, I'm actually gonna turn it off. So yeah, that's it. Okay, now we need to connect this guy also to this boat. Like that. So now when it sails, everything's sailing together. Okay, now let's do a quick simulation test and see how this stuff works. So I'm going to select my simulation box here and go into simulation and click start. All right, so I'm letting it run for about 3 frames. I'm gonna go into my perspective, and as you can see here, the water is gathering. Let's give it few more frames to start building the foam. Alright, so I let it run for 14 frames. And I think we already start gathering some waves here. And some waves on the tail. Okay, now let's check it out, how this stuff looks. Alright, very cool. We have some splashes gathering here. This is actually what I wanted to see. And the minute they're gonna start breaking, we're gonna get some foam. So this is looking good. It's a good start. Let's check out how our back looks like, if we're getting anything. And let's see what is this little guy doing here. Alright, so we are getting some nice foam that pushes, and we're also getting some water that's coming out through our motor, through those propellers. And we're gonna have a nice tail afterwards when this thing goes through. Okay, so those are the tests that I like to do before rendering the whole thing or setting up a simulation, so I'm gonna cancel that. And now let me show you this trick on how we can make it much nicer. Okay, we can see the waves are getting much higher here, so I'm gonna stop this because I'm gonna use a different boat. This is, as I said, just a dummy, but at least it gives us a nice indication on how the stuff is looking here. All right, so that's a little heavy, but at least we can export a preview for animation and see. All right, so I'm going to delete this because we don't need it. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bring my yacht now. I need to shift it back so you can see the boat became kind of slightly bigger, but I'm just gonna put it right here so the nose will be right in the middle. You can see my boat a little tilted towards the wind, so it will be a little bit more realistic. Now I can take my boat, let's close it, and I'm gonna connect it to my ship like this. Now as you can see, both of them are sailing, both of them connected. Now I can go and actually hide my ship, and I'm gonna stay just with the boat. Now the trick here is that I can actually animate this boat in order to have kind of sailing on the waves feeling. So I'm gonna tilt it up a little bit. Gonna tilt it down, up, a little down. Again, a little up, a little down. So you have to play it in order to see how the stuff is working. Maybe you need to do a bit more of those. But as you can see here, the boat, if I click G, I'm going to remove that grid, and I click P in order to be in perspective. I'm gonna close the helpers, disconnect my auto key, can see my boat is slowly sailing and going up and down. Oh, this is a nice one. It's like they're not really, you can see my keyframes, they are not really close to each other, so I have those up and downs, nice and smooth sailing. Okay, that's how the boat is supposed to go. All right, so now when this thing is ready, what I'm gonna do is select my simulation and click play, and gonna go and have some break because this thing is going to take at least 3 hours to simulate. All right, so the simulation was complete. As you can see here, we've got full floating boat animation with nice waves. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna render a couple of frames just to make sure everything's looking good. All right, let's do a couple of those. So with this one, it's a little tricky because we do see where the line ends. So you have to kind of hide it if you want to have it look like it's a seamless, sail. All right, so let's do a single shot, see how this renders. All right, and the render test is looking good. We're using full HD 1080p, and if we zoom in, we can see a very nice detail how the waves are breaking, and we're getting nice trail, and the foam is looking very realistic. So this preset is built for full HD 1080p. If you're using 720p or 4K, you're probably gonna have a different size for the splashes and the waves, something that you need to adjust in order to make it look more realistic. Okay, so now I'm going to unhide my cameras, and I'm gonna do a preview from this camera here in order to see how my sail is going. And I'm also going to add a couple of people at the back and let them interact. That way it will be more believable. Okay, so I'm gonna go into my tools here, and we're gonna click create animation. We're going to use standard, visual style, geometry, bones, and particle system. Those that we want to see. Now we're going to choose a format. So I'm gonna put it here on my desktop, call it boat sail, and we're gonna use MOV. Click save. Best, highest, okay. Now we're going to use output. So this is in percentage. It's slightly smaller than the original. I cannot actually change it, but we can see it's 24 frames per second, and we're gonna do active segment and default shading. We want to see textures. We don't have textures on this boat, but we want to see textures, background, and we don't want to see edged faces. Okay, so now we're using this shot cam. It's the same cam as appearing here on top. So let's click create. All right, and the simulation was done. Let's see how it looks. Very nice. I like how the waves are breaking, and a smooth camera move without showing the missing foam at the horizon. So we're really concentrating on what we want to see here. Okay, so congratulations, you have created your first boat sailing preset with meters, which is very accurate. Now you can save this file and reuse it. This file also is a part of VFX for ArcViz workshop, so you can download it in case you missed something and you want to double check the parameters. So this file is available for you to download and check it out. All right, so thanks a lot for watching. Download the file below. This is Alex, your VRay guy. Talk soon. Ciao.